Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gaming Daddy channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So we're going to continue on this conversation. Remember, my last video talked about the bridging the gap between developers and the community, and how, one of the developers posed a question asking, if there's anybody who can point out to where a developer ever lied and all the above. Now, I have to also give credit in some aspects to people who responded to this in a level headed way. And, I'm not talking about, spewing a lot of vitriol. I think, that conversation, even though the question was posed in a very strange way, some people took advantage of answering it in a very, I would say a constructive way if you were to, want to kind of put things in balance. Also, even, at the end of the conversation, there were parts where even Frederick Thailander himself may have even conceded some ground, even though he may have tried to, on technicality, help to, I would say almost, how do I even put it? There were parts where he almost absolved some blatant lies from developers based on technicality. But again, to be very honest, he's a developer, and, he's going to look at things from a developer's perspective that even us, the gamers, can't see. And we are the gamers, and there are things that are in our perspective that developers don't see. Developers hardly have time to even play these video games. In fact, in my opinion, I think, the QA people are the people who play these video games more than anything. And games like The Division that are live service games, these games are basically QA tested extensively by us in the community. Like, even though they hire QA people, even Yannick himself said in a Kotaku interview that there are some things that you just will miss. And until the game is released, you're not going to see all of them. This is the truth. This is the reality. This is one of the reasons as well that many people in the community are also, not necessarily too mad at Yannick, because once in a while, he'll just blatantly just tell it as it is, even though, yes, he may be, he's also one of the developers, and there might be a little bit of things that people don't like in the way he presents things, but he's one of the guys that's going to shoot straight in many instances. So one of the other things that was also mentioned in that thread is, the alternative to not, talking about features that may or may not make it in the final game is actually not saying anything till the release date. Now, I have to concede and say, there are very creative ways to still go ahead and do things like this. And in another part of the conversation as well, while there was a reply towards, well, why not just talk about things and say this is in-game engine footage or something like that? They always put these disclaimers these days, like if you watch the Battlefield 20, whatever the heck the name is. Sorry, I'm not a Battlefield person, so I can say that without any, you guys that are Battlefield people are probably like, that's sacred, whatever. They'll put, this is in-game or in-engine footage, blah, 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 blah. So, there are aspects of all of this stuff that you really have to pay attention to if you were to, ask me and say, okay, how else are game developers or, going to be able to bridge this gap, even though publishers may be on their neck, even though, it may be a situation where, the publishers have the final say on a lot of things, and nobody can necessarily, do anything outside of that paradigm. Well, the answer is very simple. I believe strongly that when marketing is taking the game and taking all of the different aspects of the game to a whole different level, someone's got to put a rein on marketing. And the job of that person, in my opinion, is kind of the game director and or the creative director. You see, one thing about marketing is their job is they need to haul in the bag, and in their, in their zeal to haul in that bag, they will pour out enough praise and enough of the so-called good stuff. In fact, this was probably the reason a lot of the developers will make this highly rendered CGI motion, trailers that would then eventually pull people in. And then after a while, that practice finally got old. Players were no longer having, fun with this. And eventually people started to, I would say, spit that thing out. And even Steam even got to a point where they said, if you're going to do anything, make sure it's something that is in game, and pictures were only going to be, shots that were taken from your game in a sense. And so this kind of alleviated that for a little bit. So I think this is one way that, developers can pretty much serve themselves better if they're able to pretty much rein in a lot of what marketing does. Another thing is also making some gameplay trailers. Yes, you can go back into an editing software and tweak lighting, or even within the engine, tweak some lighting, use a really high end computer. But as long as you're playing the game, I think players are very much, they're in a point where they'll be happy to say, okay, you showed us the game and we're going to play it. In fact, if we want to even go down even further, and again, what's funny is this conversations are happening, but it's as if, the developers and Massive forget that we've played their game long enough. So think about this, okay? So in the Division 2's reveal at E3 of 2018, how did Ubisoft Massive go about revealing the game? It was a very simple, I would say, strategy. They first went out with the high-end trailer. They talked about everything, showed the game on those high-rendered scenes, the beautiful, soundtrack stuff and everything. And then right after that, they said, hey, we have gameplay for you. They took a slice of the game, a control point that they, had available for us. And they said, hey, come and play this right now. And everybody was able to pretty much see a huge contrast, between the gameplay and the trailer that they did. And I think this lended more credibility to what they were revealing down the road. Now, again, this was where they also made mention of a bunch of systems and things that they were trying to do. I believe strongly that they could have just been a lot less, transparent or something, or maybe just not said anything in a sense, or not promised these, mechanics. Like they were talking about the brand sets and then all this stuff. And then once the brand sets came out, it just really didn't seem like it was the same set of brand sets they were talking about, because I believe that those systems were not completely done when the game was shipped. I think it was one of those, let's ship it now and then we're going to be working on it later down the road, because, they just didn't really know how players would interact with all of it if they unlocked the whole thing for everybody. And it was kind of a mess. The brand set systems, they were a mess when the game released. So there are measures that they can take, but I believe strongly, even where it comes to marketing, the creative director needs to set the expectations very, very strongly with their community. I think this really is something that, as a development studio, it will really test your resolve, because marketing and your big old publisher is wanting to make any money, but you really have to emphasize your relationship with your community if you have one. Another one in place is Bungie. Bungie made a very, very tough decision because of their desire to keep their relationship with their community, knowing that at any point, if they failed, Activision may just not be there to bat for them. They decided to leave and are now in a direct one-to-one relationship with their own community. So there's a community as a body, and then there's Bungie. They can hold each other, accountable, or the community can hold them accountable directly without having to worry about any influence from Activision or whatever. And even though they may not be perfect, this is a place where one of my, audience members was, saying that Bungie is actually doing well because they're able to relate to their community on that capacity. In fact, what's funny is the draft for that video, the one that I didn't publish, I actually mentioned Bungie in there. So all of us in the gaming world, we're kind of thinking the same thing, that these things can be done and communication can really, be properly, I would say, it can be properly deployed in a way that's measured and in a way that really does not throw the gamers, into a weird situation. So again, I don't think everybody has to be vague or not show anything until the release date of a video game. In fact, I don't think that's the case. I think what really needs to happen is there needs to be clear communication between the development team and the marketing. And when marketing is asking for a lot of things that will really overly showcase the game in the limelight, then they need to make sure and just, set people's expectations in a very realistic sense. Another thing too is a game like Division, and in this universe, I don't think you really need hype anymore. I think you just need to talk about mechanics that were in the past game that will be shown in the new game. That's pretty much all it is. You just say, oh, well, we had this in the former game, and this is also going to be making its way in the new game. I don't think it's going to be difficult to sell it. But the other games that are coming out, like Star Wars, and the other games that's going to be coming out, like Avatar, right now we don't really know much, especially with Avatar. It's really vague. They talked about aerial combat. They talked about all this stuff. So they're being somewhat vague. They're showing in-game footage. And this is basically the way to go. So, for anybody to say that there is not really a way forward, or for anybody to imply that it's challenging for you to say something without having to be super vague until release, I don't think that's realistic. You got to give your gamers information about your game if you're going to sell it at all. So that's another thing that, really has to be considered when it comes to all of this conversation about, communicating with your community or bridging the gap. Now, for future reasons. So here's another part of things that we have to look at. If you think about the future, this silence that Massive has employed with the community has really, really hurt a lot of the relationship with community members. Now, for people like me, I don't care. I go and I play with my game development thing. I'm really busy. And so that really takes my mind off of a lot of things. And so, yeah, it's in a sense for me anyways. And some other people, it's simple. I also have an active clan that whenever, it is that I want to play a raid or whatever, I want to play a legendary or whatever, I can go on our Discord and there'll be people to play. You should join the LCN clan, by the way, if you're on PC, Xbox, or even PlayStation. I'll put a link in here for the in the description for you guys, and I can just go ahead and just play with people that are really solid players, people that I do like, and so that's actually a really cool thing. So there is that level where I'm kind of insulated from a lot of these shenanigans, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, but for other people who don't necessarily have all of these, for other people who are in a sense dedicated for the game, I think this has really hurt the relationship. And to be honest, it might get to a point where the relationship is no longer it's what we call irreparable damage. They might not be able to go ahead and repair these connections very easily, because by the time they decide to start talking about anything new, other developers who understand that their communities need something are going to come out and basically, give their community things that are going to take them away from the division. And yes, people will drop this game. It may be the only unique game of its kind, but this is not going to be the case for too long. Horizon Zero Dawn, the developers of Guerrilla, just dropped their date for release in February. There are other games that Division players will more than likely enjoy that they'll be happy to go and enjoy and just get into. They just dropped the 60 FPS patch for the PlayStation 5, which is something that's really interesting. Aliens Fireteam, a good try at a third-person shooter again that's just recently out, is also something that will work. And then sports games all over the place. These may start to look very appealing, and people may just not want to deal with the Division anymore, because they started out with this development and player connection, and eventually the whole thing looks kind of severed right now. And the developers, again, like I said, need to understand the page that their own community is on in order for them to give themselves the very best advantage in this very competitive gaming scene. Or if nothing else, the indie studios are going to come in and they're going to take everything for themselves. And I hope they do so. But again, let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. This conversation is going to be ongoing. We're going to keep this line of thinking for the rest of this month and even next month. I'm going to be looking very carefully into a lot of these developers and how they approach these situations. And we'll be talking about it. This is not only a Massive thing. We're going to look at some other studios of some other games that I follow closely. And you guys are going to basically see that there's almost a trend when you kind of put everything in perspective. Thank you very much for watching the video. Hopefully we'll talk soon. Peace out.